Good evening, everyone. Thank you for coming, first of all. Nice to see so many people here. My name's Daniel Caddy. I'm the Senior Technical Manager and Geologist at Weardale Lithium. I have a background in mineral resource exploration and development. I've got about 10 years in the industry, and I've worked in Africa developing gold projects. I've worked in the Eastern Europe, in the Balkans, looking at mineral resources in the polymetallic mineral resources in Serbia, Macedonia, Bulgaria, a number of the other Eastern European countries. That was mainly gold, silver, lead, zinc, and that was on exploration and operational mining projects. I've developed a project from greenfield to almost investment ready in Argentina, which was a fluorspar project. And mixed in between that, I've also had a long involvement in the UK mining industry. And my previous role was the Senior Technical Services Manager at an underground mine in the UK, where I covered geology, mining engineering, a bit of mineral processing, the surveying, and a number of other of the technical aspects of running an underground mine. I joined Weardale Lithium just over nearly a year ago to bring those project development skills to the project and help take it up the development curve. So tonight I'm going to talk generally a bit about lithium, about geology, about Weardale, and hopefully it'll be not too technical and a bit interesting for you all. So just as a bit of a disclaimer, this presentation is really only for information purposes only. My commercial colleagues ensure that disclaimer has to go in. So what are we trying to do as Weardale Lithium? We're trying to essentially utilise the deep geothermal potential underneath Weardale to sustainably produce lithium and contribute to the net zero target of the UK. As we know, Weardale is located proximal to the EV industry in the northeast. So tonight I'm going to talk through where lithium comes from, the different sources of lithium, talk about Weardale, a bit about where Weardale is, some of the history, the geology, the geothermal potential, then some about our project, and then I'm going to conclude and sort of wrap it all together, hopefully, and show how it comes together and why it's of importance to us here in the UK. So, sources of lithium, where does it come from? Now, I'm assuming not too many of you here are fully qualified geologists, so I'll try and keep this relatively high level. But essentially there are three main sources of lithium. There is hard rock lithium, which is your traditional lithium mining that uses open pit and underground extraction techniques. It has high land use, it's carbon intensive, and it is, it's one of the main sources of lithium, but it's not the only source of lithium. There's also salar brines, which are mainly concentrated in South America. There is evaporation and precipitation is the main process there. The brine is extracted from the deep salts and then processed on site. And then geothermal brines, where you utilise boreholes to extract brine, and then direct lithium extraction technology to process that. So lithium resources are concentrated globally. And what we're showing here is a large amount of the world's lithium is concentrated in two main areas, really. South America, in Chile and Argentina, Australia, and then China. And hardly any of the world's lithium resources are from geothermal brine. It's nearly all from salar brine and traditional hard rock minerals. So what we're trying to do is very novel. So hard rock mineral is the main ore mineral is collected from a rock that's called a pegmatite. A pegmatite is a rock that crystallises out last in the mineral sequence of the crystallisation of a granite. So a granite cools over lots of time, and the pegmatite comes out last. There's two types of pegmatites. The one of interest is an LCT pegmatite, which is the lithium, cesium, tantalum. And the main ore minerals within that are spodumene, petalite, lepidolite, and zinwaldite. This is an example of a project that I was actually lucky enough to visit once. So it's a similar image to we saw before, but what this is showing is this is the pegmatite here, and this is the black rock, is all the waste. So this is showing that when you use traditional mining, you use high carbon intensive techniques. So this is mined using the traditional drill, blast, load, haul methodology. And for those of you that don't know what that is, that's you will drill holes, charge them with explosives, shatter the rock, dig it up with a big loader or an excavator, load it in a truck and take it to the processing plant. And then in the case of this project, they were producing two product grades, chemical grade and ceramic grade lithium. And they used crushing, grinding and flotation, which is very traditional mineral processing, but it's very water intensive, it's quite energy intensive, and it takes up a lot of space. There is a new source of lithium, hard rock lithium emerging, which is through granites. This has only really emerged since the demand explosion for lithium. So because granites tend to have lithium-bearing minerals in them, particularly zinwaldite, which is a lithium mica, they can be mined and processed in bulk to produce lithium. But the problem with that is it's relatively low-grade lithium, and it requires novel technology to process that material. So although it uses crushing, grinding and flotation similar to hard rock, traditional hard rock, you need special reagents, specially designed cells, and a number of other chemical processes to extract that low level. But it is quite ubiquitous. You know, even in the UK, we do have lithium-bearing granites, for example, in Cornwall and Aberdeenshire. The second major type of deposit is salar deposits. And salar deposits are found predominantly in South America. The main area is known as the Lithium Triangle, and it spans Argentina, Bolivia and Chile, and it's located high in the Andes. And salar deposits develop through a process of enclosed basins, and what I mean by enclosed is they're surrounded on all sides and they fill, and there's no escape down to an ocean for water. In these enclosed basins fill with fluids that have leached minerals from the surrounding rocks, from other basins nearby, from volcanic activity, and they evaporate off. And then once they're evaporated off, you get these deposits that build up full of salt, and at depth in those you get circulation of fluid. And those fluids become enriched and supersaturated in minerals and ions. And in particular, lithium becomes saturated in that. But this is a very land-intensive process. So this image, if you see the scale here, is 5 kilometres across. And what they're doing is using they're extracting the brine from depth through a process of mining and through boreholes, and then evaporating it in giant ponds. But this process is very land intensive, and it's also very water intensive, because you're evaporating a huge amount of water into the atmosphere. And all they do then is they collect the salts and chemically process them to produce saleable lithium products. So now we come to what I think is the most interesting of the types of lithium, and that's geothermal brine resources. And geothermal brine resources take they take aspects of geology, they take aspects of salars, they take aspects of hydrogeology, and they take aspects of geothermal systems, and essentially they combine them all together. And the general process is you have deep strata that may have very low concentrations of lithium in the minerals, and when they're deep, the groundwater circulates in them and leaches that lithium into solution. You then have, in this example, which is actually from our project, you have pathways of fracture that allow for permeability and flow of those brines along those fracture pathways. But in some ways, the brine itself in geothermal projects is actually very, very similar to the salar brine. They have similar chemical characteristics in the water. However, the brines from the salars have much higher levels of lithium, but they also have much higher levels of contaminants. So they go hand in hand. The brines from salars are super saturated. But so what that leads itself is you could process geothermal brines using mechanical evaporation. And what I mean by that is, say, like distillation columns or heating and evaporating it. However, that isn't economically feasible, nor is it environmentally sustainable to do in the Northern Hemisphere. And so there's been an emergence of a technology called direct lithium extraction. And this is an image of inside a pilot plant in Cornwall. And essentially, direct lithium extraction allows you flow the brine through the process and pull out the lithium. And I'll talk a little bit more about DLE further in the presentation. But there are a number of projects, including ours, that are now being utilised, developed in Europe and the Northern Hemisphere, that are trying to utilise DLE with the objective of being able to exploit these lithium resources that would otherwise have gone unexploited. It's securing domestic supply when the current lithium resources are very, very globally concentrated in specific areas. So that gives you an overview of the different types of lithium, different areas lithium could come from in a natural perspective. So we'll talk a little bit about Weardale. Now, I'm assuming a lot of you are a bit more familiar with Weardale than you are perhaps with types of lithium. So if I've got any of this part wrong, just heckle. So Weardale is our area of interest. It's located in County Durham and Northumberland. And it's our area of interest because it has favourable geology for the presence of the geothermal lithium-enriched brines. It's a district with substantial historic mining, which was primarily for lead and fluorspar, but also ironstone and zinc, although zinc was outside our area of interest. It was over near Nent Head. But these little symbols just give an indication of some of the key mines in and around. But Weardale is now, unfortunately, it's in a position where it had lots of historical industry, but now a lot of that industry has gone away. We have a young Weardale resident on our team, and she's highlighted to us how difficult it is for her to sort of buy a house. There's no new housing stock. A lot of the schools have closed, and so there's from where we were, say 20 years ago, 30 years ago in Weardale, when there was lots of industry, you now have a situation where there's a lack of socio-economic mobility for the young people, and we're hoping that we're going to be able to develop a project that brings skilled labour back into the area. So just a little bit on the history of mining. So the mining was undertaken mainly in the 1700s and the 1800s and early 1900s for lead, although I am aware there is sort of evidence of potential Roman mining in the region and mining that took place in the sort of post-medieval times, before the 1700s, but the main part of the mining was the 1700s onwards. It was mainly underground mining. The lead mining focused on the northeast, southwest trending veins, and it took place using a small-scale tracked equipment. And what you can see on this picture here is some of the mine tubs being dragged underground, and some of the lads going down. This is a Boltsburn mine in Rookup. This is the headgear at Boltsburn back in the day. Then there was another sort of period of mining in the 1950s that was predominantly fluorospar mining from the sort of east-west trending veins. At the moment, there is no active industrial mining in Weardale. So there's a couple more pictures that I've picked up in my research. So this is another shot of Boltsburn. You can see the tracked with the tubs on it. And then on the right-hand side here, you've got a picture of the lads working in one of the stopes at Boltsburn. And having worked underground, you can see that turn of the century health and safety is not quite what it is today. You know, I've worked extensively with the HSE in the past, and I can tell you now that flat caps would not cut it. So why is it favourable geology? So what you have in the area, it's an area called the Alston Block. It spans essentially west of Alston all the way out out towards the coast, and it's bounded on the north and south sides by big faults. The block is uplifted due to the buoyancy of the granite. Granite is lighter than other surrounding basement rocks, so it's lifted that block up. And overlying the granite is a package of 300 to 600 metres of sediments. And these sediments are sort of a mix of limestones, sandstones, mudstones, and so on. And then this is a stratigraphic column, and what this is showing is the rock sequence here. These are all the sedimentary rocks, and then the basement / granitic rocks at the bottom. These numbers and columns here, they show the number of lead and zinc and fluorospar deposits that were hosted in the different limestone units. The granites themselves exhibit radiogenic decay, which generates heat at depth, and therefore that's where we've got the geothermal potential for this project from. But interestingly, the granite was only speculated about until the 60s, when it was proven by the Rookup borehole, which was drilled by the University of Durham, and you can still visit the borehole cap today. But interestingly, I believe that this was drilled using diamond core, and for those of you that don't know, that's a technique for extracting basically columns of rock from the earth. And at the time, I understand it was the deepest borehole that was ever drilled using a diamond rig in the world, because it was 800 metres deep at that time, which is a phenomenal achievement. If anyone has any other information, then I'll stand to be corrected, but that's what I understand. So just sort of tying some of that commentary together, these are probably too complicated maps, but I'll talk about this one on the right-hand side. So what you have here is these are the bounding faults along the top, down the western edge, and along the south in orange. The contours are the depth from surface to the granites in kilometres, so between 1 and 8 kilometres depth. So you have 5 different granites, the Weardale granite being the largest here in the centre. The red lines are all the mineral veins, so all of the ones that were worked in the sedimentary package for lead, fluorospar and so on. And we're centred here in and around Eastgate. This is just tying in the geothermal angle. This was taken from a government report that was done in 2013. And what you have here is basically there are 2 areas in the UK that have geothermal energy potential, and that's Cornwall and Weardale, the northeast spanning over into the Lake District. And that is solely because of the radiogenic granites that underlie these areas. So as they decay, they generate heat. And the forecast at that point was that some of the, if this geothermal energy was leveraged to its full extent, the Weardale, Lake District and Cornish areas would contribute up to about 20% of the whole of the UK's electricity. So it's a substantial geothermal potential. So the mineral veins themselves, this is a detailed map that we got from a friend at the BGS. And basically this shows the three main fault structures in the area, in the Weardale area: the slit vein, the red vein and the white vein. And these are major discontinuities in the rock strata that cut all the way through the sedimentary sequence. And that's known from the historic mining. But what we understand connecting some of these bits together is this is a model that was done of the granites at depth. So this is the Weardale Pluton in the middle here. And what you have is strong demagnetisation along the lines of these veins. And why that's significant is what it indicates is these faults don't only cut through the sedimentary sequence, they cut deep into the granite as well, providing those potential fracture ways for fluids in the granite to circulate at depth. So sort of in summary, Weardale is very, in our opinion, very prospective for geothermal lithium enriched brines because of the nature of the geology and the geothermal credit that goes with it. So I'll talk a little bit now about our project itself. So our project is centred around two wells that were drilled in the 2000s. So our two key assets at the moment are Eastgate Borehole 1 and Eastgate Borehole 2. And these were drilled by a consortium led by the University of Newcastle. That programme was part of a geothermal energy work plan, shall we say, that was government funded. You know, it was a Labour government at the time, things were going well, there was a lot of public money about, and they had money to undertake a geothermal investigation programme. So when they drilled the 2004 borehole, that was really successful. They then worked quite closely with the Weir Valley Task Force and a number of other stakeholders in the local region to put together a project called the Renewable Energy Village, which is going to be sited on the old Lafarge cement works. I don't know how many of you are familiar with that. That project was actually taken all the way through planning, but unfortunately by the time they got round to drilling the second hole in 2010, a lot of the funding had fallen away in the financial crash, and everything that they'd done sort of fell apart. So the Renewable Energy Village never went forward. But fortunately for us, the boreholes became free, and we were able to secure them as part of our mineral assets. And the data obtained from these holes is giving us extremely valuable insight into the geology and the project. So what do the boreholes tell us? So borehole 1 was drilled to about 1,000 metres depth. It's drilled at full production specific capacity. What I mean by that is it's large diameter. So the last 600 metres of the hole from 400 metres is drilled at 8.5 inches wide. So, you know, you're talking this sort of width. And the upper part was drilled at 20 inches. So it's a big hole. And this was sited by the University of Newcastle team with the specific objective of intersecting the deep fault zones. So as I was explaining earlier, the mineral veins go straight into, presumed to go all the way into the granite, and the borehole intersects the vein, and that's where you get the flow of the lithium-bearing brine. Borehole 2 was drilled a little bit later in 2010, with the view of that being a re-injection hole for the system. So the geothermal water would be taken from borehole 1, used, then re-injected in borehole 2. Both of these boreholes showed very similar stratigraphy. You've got a package of sediments, you've got the Great Wind Sill, then another package of sediments, and then the granite at around about 300 metres. And then we had this major inflow of water and borehole 1 at about 410 metres. So borehole 1, this is a shot of the borehole itself as it is today. It's just a manhole cover with a chamber. I've been in that chamber a number of times, and there are some big spiders in there, and it's unpleasant. But what it did do is it's given us a lot of information about what's going on down there. And what this graph is showing is near surface, there was very little lithium, but as soon as we hit this major fracture, the lithium content jumped to what we believe are economic concentrations of lithium in the brine. The flow from this fracture at 410 was warm. It was around 30 degrees Celsius, and the flow was so high that it actually occluded all the rest of the results further down the hole. That's why they're pretty similar throughout then, because that zone overpowered essentially the chemistry of the rest of the hole. It also told us about the geothermal potential. So what it showed us is there's a higher than average geothermal gradient below Weardale, which is what was expected. And again, we saw the same problem historically, that the fracture zone at 410 occluded the lower part of the hole in terms of the temperature profile. But we've since done work that shows that this red line is the true gradient. After the hole's been stood for a number of years, we were able to measure the temperature at the bottom, and it was on that red line. And what that means is, what this is showing is if we drill a hole of 5,000 metres, 5 kilometres, which is actually a very normal depth for a geothermal borehole, we will have a high enough heat level for electricity generation. And that is our intention in the long run, is that we will scale up the project from where we are now at development stage through pilot, and then eventually into a large-scale project that's powered from geothermal electricity. So we're just orientating that. Where are we going to do that? We have borehole 1 and borehole 2. This is the cement work site itself, so you can see we're very proximal. For those of you that don't know, this quarry used to quarry limestone. It was taken to a crushing plant here, and then it was conveyed across the river into the cement works. So the cement works is an ideal site. It's probably the best brownfield site in probably all of County Durham for this activity. It's a processing, it's where we're going to put the processing plant in the future. That's certainly our plan anyway. It's got all the infrastructure that we need, access onto the main road, 66 kV substation, gantry over the river. And so we're very happy that we've got a good project in place to sort of take lithium development in Weardale forward. So how are we going to process this? So I touched on this a little bit earlier. Lithium processing, direct lithium extraction. This is it's in some ways a very new technology, but also an established technology. So direct lithium extraction leverages existing water treatment technology and techniques such as adon absorption, ion exchange and solvent extraction. However, where it becomes really novel is the materials that you use inside those processes. So you can buy this equipment from lots of different suppliers, but the material, the medium that you use for the sorption or the ion exchange, these are very proprietary because they're developed to be extremely selective to lithium. So it's essentially, you're talking tens of thousands of times of selectivity of lithium ions compared to the other ions in solution. But DLE isn't the only part of the process. It gets more complicated. You have pre-processing, so pre-concentration and other methods, and post-processing. But essentially what you get to is from your brine as your input over here, you have 3 exit points, either as concentrated lithium chloride solution for further onward processing, or the two real end goals are the battery grade products, lithium hydroxide or lithium carbonate, which would go straight to the battery manufacturing industry. And what we can say at this time, and there'll be more announcements from the company in the coming weeks, is that our brine is amenable to DLE processes. So hopefully that wasn't, I tried to keep that a bit high level because I realised looking up the slides are quite technical on that. But anyway, to sort of like try and wrap that up into some conclusions at the end. So, you know, lithium now, I imagine a lot of people have heard a lot about lithium and lithium batteries and electric vehicles in the news recently. And that is all down to net zero targets. Because one of the main objectives of the net zero targets and the use of lithium is to create a better energy storage ecosystem. So batteries aren't just used for electric vehicles, you know, they can be coupled with wind generation and solar so that you have proper off-grid storage solutions for your energy. One of the main downfalls of renewable energy at the moment is you don't have that battery storage capacity. But, you know, building the lithium storage, you know, at the moment, the demand of lithium is massively outstripping the supply. So that's pushing up prices. But it's also, as we were sort of, you know, we were touching on before, it's concentrated globally. So we need to look at domestic supply. And Weardale is very well positioned to meet the EV industry that's centred in the northeast. We're very close to the Envision factory, the Gigafactory, and hopefully if someone rescues British Volt, we'll be close to them or their successor. We're also close to all the ports, so we can secure access to the global markets. We see that the project for producing lithium from geothermal brines is substantially environmentally sustainable in comparison to the traditional hard rock mining and salar type minings, just simply because, you know, we can reduce CO2 to net zero through geothermal power generation and other sustainability initiatives that other types of lithium mining can't leverage. We use, although we're processing significant quantities of water, we're not actually losing any of that, we're consuming very little of it. And in comparison, per tonne of lithium, we're using substantially less land. So there's a much lower impact. So, you know, this is the concept for the future. It's extract hot water, hot geothermal water, extract the heat to generate electricity, to feed into the grid and for our own process. The cool water will go through to the lithium plant, where the lithium will be extracted, and the spent brine will be re-injected. So, as I was sort of touching on, skipping back to this slide at the beginning, this is very important for the UK to take notice of, because, you know, the supply chain risk on lithium at the moment is very, very high. You know, if there was some sort of geopolitical change in Chile or in Argentina, which are not the most stable countries, you know, you would suddenly have huge amounts of lithium lost from the supply chain. So the supply chain itself, mining and processing, this is where Weardale Lithium sit. If we can do that sustainably, that which we are planning to do, that will take out a significant part of the carbon emissions in the supply chain. We then feed that into battery cell production, battery pack production, and into the EV supply chain here in the northeast. Now, the last stage, recycling and reuse, there is an emerging set of technology that will allow lithium to be extracted from spent batteries, and that will start to feed in the future into a more circular economy. You'll note at the moment I'm showing the supply chain there as a end-to-end supply chain, but for me in the future, although might put my job under threat, some of this primary stuff will get pulled out, and we'll start seeing less and less primary input into all systems. I'm a firm believer that the circular economy will be better for us all. So, you know, we've been noted as a project of national significance. We're part of the Critical Minerals Association, which is an association that's been put together to support the UK's critical minerals strategy. And the Northeast was identified as an area of special interest within that critical minerals strategy that the government published last year. So, in summary, you know, we feel we've got exclusive access to geothermal brines at Eastgate. We're located near to the core of the UK EV supply chain. We've secured probably the best brownfield site for processing in the northeast. We believe the project's of national significance for UK lithium supply, and you know, we will be working to scale up the project over the coming years. So hopefully that's been interesting, and you can find us on the internet and social media, and yeah, thank you very much.